whether it's at the camp or it's at the Congress, start with the phrase, "I've got bad news for you." This year, I offer a document of capitulation first. And there is not only bad news around, there is good news around as well. You will see a bit later when the Quintessenz guys will rejoin me here on the podium and will demonstrate the beginnings of our common project. Myself, I'm Eric Löchel, Senior Editor to Future Zone. This is the technology news website of the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation, ORF. This is like a small copy of the German ARD, and it's a public broadcasting station. And as you can see, they allow me to do a few things in my job as a reporter. Well, what you see here is a document that passed the EU Green Year during December. It is the so-called passenger name records affair that has been viral, let's say, since last March. What has this to do with NSA standards for our passports? Well, I can show you roughly. First of all, I would like to start with this current affair and explain in a few words in what condition Europeans are now and who has brought them there. The point is, what you see here is the results of Commissary Fritz Bolkestein. He's for Interior Trade, Commissioner for Interior Trade, renegotiated with the United States. One should know that in the beginning, in March, when Quintessenz published the first document on that matter, it was the preliminary agreement between the US and the EU. After 15 months of negotiations, everybody was shocked what the EU Commission had negotiated with the US. This means they agreed to transfer up to 40 data fields per person and per flight to US computer systems. You know which kind of agencies these do operate those computer systems and what they do want to do with those data. So to say, those 40 data fields per person, one of the data fields, let's say first name, second name, all the usual things you have on the passport as well. But these data fields, they say a bit more. Because one of the data fields says, who paid the ticket? When was it paid? How was it paid? Was it paid by credit card number, company name, who paid it, date of payment, and so on and so on. You can imagine why those voluminous data sets per person are being wished by the US authority. It's very easy. If you have a passenger list and you see there are 15 names of people sitting in the business class. So what? What do you know? You know their names, you know their age, you know a few other data, and that's it. But if you have got the additional data fields, you can say 5 of those people are Siemens managers, because their ticket was closed at the same office, was paid with the same source, and it will say the name of the company. So after a while, the Commission understood that their effort to, when the Commission does a thing, it's always economics first. They came to this agreement with the US on passenger name records for one simple reason. Because the US side said if you don't deliver those data just in time, 72 hours before start of the flight, you won't get any landing rights for your airplane. Remember the last few days, Air France machines that were not allowed to land. and to depart. During those renegotiations, really the worst things could be put off, so to say. So those data, those personal data, will not be kept for 50 years as long as usual, as intended before, but just for 3.5 years. How generous. But this is as well against the EU Directive on Data Protection. It is not conform to European laws. So the Commission breaks the laws. And the Commission encourages all the other EU institutions to break the law. And what they are going to do with the European Data Protection Directive is very easy to say. There will be another hole drilled into it and say, oh yes, generally the data are being protected and there are very strong rules on that, but in this case, we give them away because we have to give them away for economic reasons. So the EU Commission traded in our civil rights for economic reasons. But there was one thought that did not come to their minds early enough. What if the US uses those data with another intention? If you know all movements of senior European managers, if you know those movements and you have kept the records in detail in databases, you can tell in what kind of business they are engaged in. You can tell what they have in their minds. If Siemens managers and Alcatel managers all go to Brazil, well, it would be a reason for the NSA to give an alarm call to loosen technologies, because there might be a business around, but the other companies, the European companies, will close, and so on and so on. This argument helped a bit with the European Commission's efforts to repair this case. But, to be fair, Mr. Bolkestein never had a chance to mend this case, because the negotiations, the earlier negotiations by the British Commissioner, Christopher Patten, that alarmed everybody, well, they had negotiated for 15 months with the US. Would you expect that your partner who sits on your table for 15 months, Mr. Patten's division in the EU, would say then after 15 months, let's start all over from the beginning because the EU Parliament doesn't like it what we have negotiated? No, it's impossible. You just can't do repairs or so. And what European members of Parliament told me, it's this fabulous Austrian guy called Hubert Pirker. He made a lot of noise in spring and tried to put the EU Commission to the European Court of Justice, because they intended to break European law, the Data Protection Directive. In December, Mr. Pirker told me he will take them to court, and this guy is the spokesperson in security matter to the conservative fraction in the EU Parliament. He's a majority speaker. We can't go on with the US side as we had to, and we had to give in, and you see, so nothing will happen. They will drill another hole to the Data Protection Directive. They will deliver all data to the data sets to the US, and there are also the next countries have ordered those data sets from European passengers. Any suggestions who these countries might be? England, Australia, Canada. Aren't they together in some kind of system that is called Yakuza Alliance, and they operate the Echelon system together? Yes. And that's the only and simple reason for that. You know, Echelon is not a system of those drones and clothes you see everywhere. This is an old-fashioned part of echelon that loses importance with every year, because this is intended to cover analogous satellite communications. This is dying out, this is simply vanishing. Echelon is a database system, nothing else. A system of databases, and those passenger name records will play a vital role in the so-called US Department of Homeland Security US visit program. This is really a monster. They intend to, just a minute, I tried to have this presentation from the net because most of the documents I show you are on Quintessenz website, but there are a few difficulties with the net, so I decided to do it from the hard disk. But it won't take long. The US visit program was developed by the Department of Homeland Security, Ministerium für Heimatschutz. This sounds bad in European ears. This sounds very, very old-fashioned. This sounds more than 50 years old. And this system is, to say it in short, it's a system, it's some kind of, it's like a ticketing system to a stadium that is peopled, where people live in, but others pass through. So what they intend to is here we have, here it is. It's a vast program connecting altogether about 180 airports, 280 seaports, and I don't know how many land-based point of entries in the United States. This means there are 500 million of data sets every year. Excuse me, but I will forget this. There are 500 million data sets every year of people coming in and going out. And the Department of Heimatschutz decided to count them, to number them, and to give everybody a number of his own. So you could say, this person has entered the US by land, port of entry via Canada or so on, that and that time, and the system is designed to alert customs officials if somebody who came in with a visa extended his stay more than 3 months. So you see, the whole system, you can perceive the whole US visit program, and you see here what the whereabouts are. It is an enormous program that should tell customs officials at any time, at any person, this person, green, red, or yellow. You know, they do a simple scoring system. If you pay your tickets in advance and you pay in cash, you get extra points. If you buy your tickets just a short while before your flight, you get extra points. If you don't buy by credit card, but you pay in cash, extra points. If you travel alone, extra points. And so it's like, you should know this mechanism from simple spam filters. It's the same system they apply for people leaving people into the US or shutting them out. And this huge system of databases is designed to give the necessary information. Everybody of you who knows about databases knows that 500 million data sets that are from foreign sources all. This is up for troubles. You are up for troubles if you try to do this, and they are in deep troubles. When I spoke to the Austrian Minister of Interior 4 weeks ago, who had just returned from a visit to the US, he told me that he and his technicians where in Florida, I think it's in Orlando, where this was one of the model points for this US visit program, and the US Department of Customs, that is part of the Heimatschutzministerium, wanted to demonstrate the ability of the systems, and there were those very simple Austrian cops standing around and looking at the many computers and databases, and they tried to run the system, and simply nothing worked. Nothing. But, you know, he told me then that they are overestimated. One should never overestimate anybody, and one should never forget what does not work today will work in a year's time or in 2 years' time. If you just remember what changed during those years, you're active in IT and you watch what's happening in IT. If you see the changes there, then you can be sure that they will overcome these difficulties. Because they started the program and they just can't simply shut it down. They have erected a whole new bureaucratic apparatus, a real ministry that reaches from the Department of Transport to the intelligence community. And if I manage to find the page, I can tell you who is involved in this system. Here, this is more or less the background. How come that we have these laws now? Here is the Department of Homeland Security organization chart. So, you know, this is not my own presentation. As always, I show foreign presentations. This is a presentation that was done at the Biometric Consortium Conference 2003. And this was there was a speech by Mr. Asa Hutchinson, who is, at least in German terms, it would be Staatssekretär. And he's in charge of this system. And, you know, here is the roadmap, how it will start. You have collect and verify biometrics for foreign nationals with visas. So you can expect next time you enter the US, they're waiting for you with the print scanner, with the fingerprint scanner, because they will do biometrics on the spot, if they are not included in your passport. Here they say, issue biometric travel documents following ICAO international standards. ICAO is the International Civil Airlines Organization. 188 member states, and what the ICAO decides will be put into action. So we will see what's the ICAO's selection of biometric methods and means for our passports, because our future travel documents are done by the ICAO. And there is a very influential group of American experts helping in those high-tech things like biometrics. And biometrics, you know, it's not only you have fingerprints and you have a database and that's it. You need a database interchange format. You need communication between the biometric readers and the database. And as this is all designed to cross national borders, so this whole system is getting pretty complex. And they have to do lots and lots of standardization things to keep things more or less in balance. And the roadmap is very easy, and I can show you how the ICAO sees this roadmap. This is here, and you will see it's pretty much identical with the US. You just need to find this Australian document. What you see here will be explained later when the Quintessenz guys will show you what we tend to do with the vast amount of documents we have acquired. Meanwhile, it's more than a gigabyte of documents, and most of them are pretty slim documents. So we have more than 1,600 related, and we will say this later. We are here now in this is all International Standards Organization. This is all the JTC1, ST17 and ST37 working groups. The ST7 working group does biometrics, and nothing else. And the SC17 working group does everything standardization of contactless cards, of chips, of everything. This is being standardized in these international standards organizations groups. And every year they have their biometric symposium. For example, at this time I'll show you this. Here, it's the Biometric Consortium meeting last year. This year it's the same, it's more or less the same. What's important is, you see, who presides in this Biometric Consortium. It's the NSA. They don't even care. They don't even care to hide that. Those two people open every session of the Biometric Consortium. And the nice thing is, Mr. Polio, who is head of the National Institute of Standards and Technology Biometric section, he's also the head of the International Standards Organization Biometrics Working Group. And this is his body. And it's virtually like this. The Biometric Consortium in internal language is called an incubator. You might remember what that means from the .com times. An incubator is a body that tries to raise and to nurse small companies until they can stand on their own feet and do their own business. So here there are about 100 more or less smaller companies around this consortium, and they are all paid with NSA money. This is all NSA funded, and it's again for a very simple and obvious reason, because the NSA needs those companies. If you don't have enough biometric companies around that do the shit work, reading in people and putting in their biological identity into a RFID chip. They will design an RFID chip and will put it into our passport. Those people, they need raw material. If you don't have biometrics in passports, how can you do biometric numbering of people? You can't do it, so you have to have it first. And this is what they decided. And what the EU gave in December. If you look at those people here, you see, they show their biographies as well, and of course we took advantage of that and downloaded a few hundred of those biographies, because every speaker at the consortium offers his biography, except quite a few military people, but even the NSA people confess who they are and what they have done. And this is nice because they never showed themselves so publicly, and this is the first time we got into possession of names and numbers. We would like those data about them as well, just to understand how they do it. Who says what, and whose standards are being implemented. And these standards, not one of them is European. Not one of them. They are all from the in past times you could say the electronic military complex. Now you have to say the biometric electronic military complex, because nearly most parts of the US Army, there is a whole biometric section doing nothing else for the US Army but biometrics. And that's the way the US did it. That's biometrics first in the army. First criminals, then the army, then visas, and then everybody. Do you remember our own ministers of interior this year, what they were talking about when they met? When they met, they talked about biometrics in visas for people who come to the EU. That's the way it usually starts. First them, then us. And with them, well, they can do some kind of field study. Are there any protests? Come on, who will protest because a guy, people here called Asylwerber comes and wants to stay? Well, let's fingerprint him. And we are the next, of course. And until the middle of the year, there was only this talk about visas and biometrics in visas. It's the others who come, not us. After a while, at the G8 meeting, there is a G8 biometrics group. And this G8, you know, the G8, the big 8 countries, and this G8 biometrics group is chaired by 2 nations. Together, they do it together. Would you guess that France and the USA have agreed? They have. They have just parted the world. France takes this part for his biometric companies. You must not forget, there is money to be made in this. There are 5 billion of people around who need new passports. And every single one of them needs to be registered biometrically. So, with everything that big nations do, there is always an economic reason with it. And the US side and the French agreed. They all have, let's say like this Sargent Morpho, which is, I think it's still state-owned. It's a very big biometric French company. And a few US players are the only big players in this field. There are tiny companies around. 20 people, 30 people working there. You can't compare this biometric industry with any of the industries you know. It's not even comparable with the internet in its beginnings. It's a very, very small specialized field. They are vastly growing, but they are growing into all directions. And now I'll switch to another document, not to show you always the list. And we will see how biometrics came into the real world and what kind of data formats they choose for the US and what kind of data formats we will get. It's, again, a very simple thing. The point was the US Patriot Act. You remember this law they did 6 weeks after 9/11? A very ill-conceived law. They just turned the screws everywhere they could get. They turned the screws a bit and that was it. And the US Patriot Act says foreign nationals coming to the US must be registered biometrically. So the whole US visit system was put into action for this reason, because they had created a law and now they had to fulfill it. By the way, the demand from Europe to deliver passenger name records to the US is also a part of the US visit program. So this is all one large complex, and most of everything negative Europe derived from that stems from these laws that further put the split, that even further the split between the EU and the US in matters of law. The European Data Protection Directive is not compatible to US law, and there are always problems in international contracts and agreements because the European says, but our Data Protection Directive says. And the US say, come on, fuck off with your fucking Data Protection Directive. You are hindering the free trade. And this is how the US side sees it. They say, okay, this is another European trade barrier. And the passenger name records agreement was reached by a very crude deal. At the same time, you just need to listen what kind of news is at the same time around. At that time, the US agreed to cut their import, the import taxes on foreign steel products. They had raised artificial barriers so Europeans were not able to deliver and to sell steel in the United States for 16 months. And after a while, Bush gave in, and the Europeans gave in with the passenger name record system. And now we will fulfill what NIST and the NSA have developed. It's so simple. So this is all, it's all this guy you saw before, Polio, doing this, who does it as well for the international organizations. And here you see comparison, how the rates decrease if faces are not lit properly in face recognition technology. And here there are a few tests they did with millions of data sets just to see how many false positives they get out. You know what false positives there are. This is a main problem of biometrics. You check 1,000 people and you get 10 people out. Something does not fit. But those 10 people are being selected and put out of the queue because the system does not work properly, and not because they committed anything. And that's the main risk at the implementation of all biometrics products on US airport. I'm just looking for one distinct information here. Here you see thumb and index finger, right hand. You will find this very soon in European passports. This is the US system. And here you see 50 million. This is why they say let's have now fingerprints in the passports. Why they need them? Because alone the AFIS system of the FBI has 50 million data sets, biometric data sets, fingerprints. 50 million fingerprints, and this is not of 50 million criminals, but just half of them are criminal records. The other 25 million fingerprints in FBI databases are by innocent inhabitants of the United States who managed to join the army for a few years, so they had to leave the biometric data there. And so the FBI and of course the NSA are amassing huge masses of have a mass of fingerprints. So what can they do? They need more fingerprints to compare them. There were no fingerprints in European passport until recently, and if you're interested, Mohammed Atta had his fingerprints in his passport because all Egyptian passports have fingerprints inside, and Saudi Arabian passports. In the European Union, even the Greek passports have a fingerprint inside. But it's, this is all not, as long as it is not machine readable, the dangers are in balance. But at the moment when this is machine readable, you will see the big machine starts moving. And it will move day and night, and it will compare as it has data sets available. And you see, 2 fingerprints for only one reason, because the FBI has so many fingerprint data. Here are some other testing things, but it was not the correct document. They all resemble each other. I just flipped through this. This could be this. Yeah, this is the right one. This is the National Biometric Security Project. This is part of the Department of Homeland Security efforts, but there is another agency involved. You see, this is the what's to do. What shall we do? Mission, objectives, current status. And here are 3. The Biometric Foundation is another incubator, and the International Biometric Industry Association is just the association of industry. And here here you see how it should work. This is more or less the system, the very rough systems architecture, and assessments, vulnerability, and things. And here you see, it's administered by the NSA, but this is a civil society project. This is not a military project, but it's administered by the NSA. And it's no secret that the whole plan was made by the NSA, because it's their job to do things like this, and that is why they employed 30,000 employees. The NSA has 30,000 employees. That is Hewlett-Packard size. And the NSA is as large as the FBI and the CIA together. So you just can imagine how many brains are working there every day, developing plans like these, developing new systems, new database interchange formats. And now, this is US, and now we go to the International Civil Aviation Organization, and let us see what is the difference between the plans for our passports and the US system. One more moment. This should be the one. Yes. This is how photographs have to be handled in our future passports that contain radio frequency identification chips. You see what's wrong and what's right, what's forbidden and what not. The one is too small, the other one is too large, and this kind of smile is allowed. But you see, can you see what is forbidden? Squinting is forbidden. So on your passport photograph, be careful not to squint, because face biometrics won't work if you squint on a photograph. And grinning and smirking is forbidden as well. The only thing, says this document, and it's done by the Australian delegation to the International Civil Airlines Organization, says a faint, well, this is forbidden as well, you see. And also, the wearing of ridiculous hats is forbidden. But also, you're not allowed to wear Jewish kippah. You're not allowed to wear anything. otherwise facial biometrics won't work. And those facial biometrics, the system is designed very simple. There is one RFID chip. There is your face on a JPEG 2K, in JPEG 2K format, and there are images of two of your fingers, index and thumb. Can you imagine why they use images of your fingers and not a template? Would have saved much. You know, the RFID chips are not large. They can't contain enough data to fulfill all those requirements. If you imagine, they have only 32K, the largest one now. So you have a JPEG image of a face. You have two fingerprints images, two other JPEGs, and then you have a whole lot of other data sets that are being included on the chip. So it would be quite full. Why didn't they decide to biometrize your face and put it on a template, a combination of a few numbers, a hash? Only images are interoperable, say those documents. And if you think twice, it's all very logical. There are 150 biometric companies around. They have 150 different systems. Why? Yeah, because those systems just differ in what kind of templates they use and what kind of algorithms they use. Roughly said. So every company has to develop a different solution, because otherwise it would be plagiarism. But this is hard to standardize. If every company has to do a product that is different from the other companies, how will you standardize it? You could, even the US, who tends to rash decisions, would not have dared to take one solution of one company and declare it the universal standard for passports. This is simply, nobody would have agreed to that. So they use images. They're already pretty good in comparing those images. They have year-long experience. 70% of the FBI's 50 million or 40 million fingerprint data sets are already on JPEG images. 30% are still on dead trees on paper. 30%. So you see a long wave. First step, RFID chip, JPEG image, to fingerprints, all images. So every country is free to do their own biometrics. So everybody can read those fingerprints in as he pleases with any system. But it will work with all systems around. And that's the only way they can achieve some kind of interoperability. The next step, and this is already in the roadmap, and it is, well, it's no mystery anymore. The NSA roadmap will be valid for European passports. Point. That's it. We get exactly the same standards the NSA proposed for their US visit system. Nothing else. We get the same system. This is what the NSA proposed, and this is what the European Ministers of Interior agreed to during the last 3 weeks. It was a meeting of the Big Five. This is the largest 5 EU members. They met, and you even must have read it in the newspapers and forgotten it immediately, because he just said, Schröder and Co. and the others, they all declared, no, Schiele and Co. and the others declared that Europe should have a system that is common with the US system. So to develop a common system, that was the language they said. Of course it's a common system, it's the fucking NSA standards, and if Europe takes it over, it's a common system. And this is the way this process ran until now. So you can expect until 2004, 2005, you will have those chips in every new passport, you will have an image, and you will have those fingerprints. But there is already in the template of the ICAO for machine-readable travel documents, there is already a data field reserved for iris biometrics. It's already reserved because it's for sure that this data field will be filled with iris data after a while, because with iris data, there are very few iris data sets already around from living people. You can't compare this with fingerprints. There are not many of them around because it's in a phase of experiment still. And the only valid method to read iris in is patented. A guy from the computer lab of Cambridge University holds the one and only valid patent of iris reading. So you can't do any iris biometrics without getting into contact and getting a license for using this technology. But the patents will expire, as far as I know, in 2 years. They will expire because it's a very old patent. This guy who holds it is some kind of awkward mathematics genius at the Cambridge University who sports great people, like Ross Anderson, you might know. Well, back to the point. What was not for sure during my past lecture, during my last lecture here last year, and the lectures on the chaos communication camp, would be how things would further develop. But I can tell you, they developed pretty one way in this field, and are even developing. They've even accelerated even further. As you see, you have those travel data sets. There's a huge amount of very precious data. If you know who moved where, how many times, how often, and you can do statistics on that, it's a very valid knowledge for you. There are the other data you might remember from my past lectures. They get via the ETSI interfaces from the telephone systems. To some extent, very similar data sets. Who called when, who called whom, at what time, how often, when, and what's the top 10 of numbers he called, and so and so. So you can use this data perfectly in large machineries, as the NSA operates, as the Department of Homeland Security operates. Meanwhile, it is a collection of 35 or so enormous databases. And you must imagine, to keep all this running, people coming into the USA, people leaving the USA, and you have always to have those data sets up to date. I see this as a pretty difficult task, but this is what is going on. The point is, the Europeans did not decide to have such a system. The Europeans will have such a system as well, because the American system, it's under the motto, extending our virtual borders. The only difference between the first contract on passenger name records and the second, the amended agreement, is that the second one is on a reciprocal basis. So the Europeans would get data from American passengers entering Europe as well. But we didn't ask for those data. Nobody asked for them. Ah yes, the United Kingdom then remembered asking, as they always do if the poodle's master whistles. We will be forced to imply a similar system, because the US has extended the virtual borders right into Europe. All those points where you leave Europe for the US must already comply with US Department of Homeland Security standards, whether it be on Frankfurt Airport or somewhere else, where an international flight goes for the States. So, with this kind of policy, in the middle run, the European Data Protection Directive is meanwhile not worth the bits it is saved upon. This has become more or less worthless because there are so many exceptions in it. Yes, very strict data protection, this and that and that. But if paragraph 26 comes up, and this means a case of national emergency, nothing remains of the Data Protection Directive meanwhile, because the members of the majority of the European Parliament castrated the Data Protection Directive last year during the cybercrime negotiations and said, oh yes, in case of national emergencies, providers can be forced for data retention. They must contain data and they must keep them, and they are not even allowed to throw them away. By the EU Data Protection Directive, German law, Austrian law, and close to every law in Europe, you are not allowed to keep those data. You act against the law if you keep data you don't need for billing. And the EU Parliament decides this could be a valid exception. So you need not wonder that Europe is being kicked around. They are not consequent. They don't remain on the point of view. And if the US gets, well, acts like a bully as they did during the past years, the European says, we don't, wir dürfen das amerikanisch-europäische Verhältnis nicht überstrapazieren. This is the words they use in the European Parliament. And this is what this guy, Pirker, told me, who first held an infuriated speech about the ruthless commission that sells our privacy rights to the US in spring, and in autumn, the same guy says, wir dürfen das europäisch-amerikanische Verhältnis nicht überstrapazieren. Come on, what kind of policy is this? Who should believe in this policy? Who should respect this policy? Nobody. And nobody, Christopher Patton, who was the person in charge to negotiate with the United States, there were no consequences for him. There were no consequences. Mr. Patton even said to the airliners, operate and violate. Violate means violate European law by delivering those data sets to the US. This is the status quo now. We have a little bit more time. I would like to ask Quintessenz people slowly to come up, because I don't want to... Ich möchte Ihre Geduld nicht überstrapazieren. I just show you another document. This just came in. It's pretty interesting, and it's not exactly biometrics, but it will play the same. It will play a major role in the whole system, because biometric data is just part of the whole system. And here you see the last developments in American surveillance laws and surveillance standards is this nice document. So here you see, this is for official use only, as you see. Government restricted, and I would say that the right and official use is here, showing it to the public. This document contains some kind of new dangers we were waiting for. It says. It says electronic surveillance needs for carrier-grade voice-over packet services. This is nothing less, nothing else that there are many providers around, for example, who sell DSL lines or have unbundled a telecom network, and they sell fast internet access. So many of them started to offer voice-over IP telephony as well. This was not a matter of urgent surveillance standardization before, because there was not much IP telephony around, and the prospects for growth were not good then. But this changed during the last years, and so you see here, this is one of the typical documents we have in our collection, which is much bigger than those few biometric documents we showed you, on surveillance of circuit switch networks, of telecom networks in general, whether it be mobile networks or fixed networks. And you see, this is a document of more of 200 or so pages, and everything is done in every detail. And the funny thing is, and this is how I would like to end, right after 9/11, Europe, the FBI CALEA implementation section. CALEA is the Communications Assistance Law Enforcement Amendment. This is simply a surveillance law dating back to 1994, but it just came into validity by 2001 around, because there were many quarrels about the costs of surveillance. Telephone companies didn't want to pay that themselves, and so there was a long struggle going on to keep that short. These guys started to be seen. High CALEA FBI officials appeared in the European Telecom Standards Institute in certain work groups after 9/11. Because most of those surveillance standards have been done in the US before they were done in Europe. And we have much different telecom networks, so the standards are pretty much different. Not so with biometrics, because we have the same skin more or less. And now is the time, as you see, that voice over IP needs to be tapped. The point is, it's pretty easy to tap, and it's not so, in a telephone network it's pretty easy, where to tap it. There are interfaces and everything. But if you go to an internet provider and say there are, I don't know, 1/3 of your customers uses voice over IP telephony, I need to have details of those connections. So it will be a matter for the internet provider to analyze all of his traffic. This is just as a finishing point, adds to this system, because those data from the telecom networks are as well destined to go in that Department of Homeland Security's computer system. And they will be linked to the telephone number in the passenger name record of your passport. So you see, slowly, all documents are being interlinked together, they find your telephone number somewhere in an American telephone data warehouse because you called the US, and then the connection will be stored. Not what you said, but the fact that you have called this number in the States and so long and this and that. So the accompanying data. And those data from the telecom networks will be mixed with those data from the customs networks, where the passports data are being poured in, and then the next is internet data, and you see, and if you add all those government databases, government already operates, there are hardly any mysteries about anybody left that can't be solved within a minute. There are hardly any mysteries. I can remember 3 or 4 years ago when I talked here about, it was about those telecom wiretapping efforts. In fact, it's not wiretapping, it's statistical analysis of all communication in those networks. It was right at the beginning, and the papers I now show as historical papers. That's how it was before, until this happened. This famous Siemens paper I showed of the Siemens surveillance system. It's ridiculous now. It was nice and interesting in the 90s, but monitoring centers of that kind do not exist anymore, because the whole telecom network is one single monitoring center. So they are integrated in a much larger monitoring solution, and this is how things went in the telecom sector. Now we are at the IP, voice over IP. That's more or less the last means of communication. They have not standardized already how to do surveillance on it. So if you put analogies to that, you can imagine how far we will be in 3 years with our passports and with the applications and systems that run everywhere around the world, in the European Surveillance Union as well as in the US Surveillance Union. We will have the same systems, and you will see in 3 years much of those things that are being shown, IT chips are still too small. We will wonder about that in 2 or 3 years, that we have put these in question. And this is usually at the end, I always end it with bad news, but this time it's good news. There are these 3 brilliant young men, and together, not all of us are here, together around this research we have been doing for years now, in all those fields of surveillance and loss of civil liberties, brought us to the conclusion, not only showing what is going on, but really showing what is going on, giving names. Names that could be connected with social security numbers. This is easy to find out in the US. And we have so many nice names and nice biographies. People working for the NSA, we know who they are and where they sit, so it's pretty easy. They don't deserve a right to privacy. CCC, when I put a list with the names first into the net, they wanted to sue the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation, Heise Verlag, and a few other institutions where these names were printed. And 2 or 3 of those people disappeared later from the standardization institutes because they didn't want to have their name kicked around. And these experiences of the past and the instance that we have so many names and documents, and there could be hidden names all over those documents because there is a plan to uncover those. And I will now hand over, who will do the first part? I think Chris will do the introduction. You get You get this first. So, I'll stay here for a while, but my part is finished. I'll hand over to those three people, and everybody who has any questions might go at the end of the presentation, because I think we will now cut the whole thing, because this is the direct, more or less the direct consequence of that, of the picture I painted here. What we are going to do. Was? Ja, bevor ich nicht um Kopf und Kragen rede. Spielst du Sommer oder was? Ich verstehe nicht, warum das nicht geht. Auf CD?
In the last lecture you have seen a lot of documents and a lot of analysis, and analysis processes are ongoing and running, political processes and processes of surveillance and interception. This biometric lecture is not the first project in Quintessenz history, and I want to introduce you the new project and the new team who wants to data mine and collect and search and investigate biometric documents. And I want to give you a short overview what happens, a short overview about the team and what brought us to this state where we are now. First, we can call it also investigative technical journalism, because we have a lot of information and we want to determine an ongoing process to analyze this process. And next you get an overview of our biometric doqubase. Search and collect documents, analyze them, information analysis, and also XML database where we store the documents and can find out cross connections between documents. Now you see a crime scene. So why crime scene? Because there is something common between a crime scene and the situation on the next slide. What do we have on a crime scene? And what we can do when we have a crime scene. Here somebody got murdered, it's a crime. And at this point the facts are focused on our more and more technical investigations by the police. They do data mining called Rasterfahndung, which is very popular in Germany. You can do a lot of things with that, but you will never find really the suspect or the committer of a crime. You can get the communication of suspects. You can get the phone calls of 150,000 people when somebody has broken into a house. It's common. You can check the bills, the tickets, documents of the person. You can also get the DNA and the fingerprints. At the moment, each country wants to have the biggest DNA database in the world. I'm proud to say that Austria has the third biggest DNA database general behind Austria, behind Canada and USA. And what are the results? You get a suspect. You get, when you're lucky, a committer of a crime, and you find out the organizations and the financier behind that organization, maybe it's the mafia. If you hear a call, it's always the mafia behind everything. And you can judge the suspect by a lawyer or by the government. So, what's this? This is a meeting of the biometric standardization committee. There's no really intention for me to show you first a crime scene and show you this slide. But maybe it's also a crime against civil rights. So what we do have now, we have facts, we have different protocols of meetings, conferences and so on, where the people who make these standards meet each other and decide how you get intercepted by them. You get standardization drafts where they define it very detailed. You get business presentations. That's a very nice feature. Every company wants to show you that they can monitor 5 or more S10.1 lines in real time. And you always get some sort of communication of them, maybe emails, press, and a lot of different channels you can get them. And what are the results? You get the authors, you get the members, you get the people behind. You find out who is pushing this movement in standardization, and you can also find out the political background and the finances behind. And what is the real result? Cyber liberty organization, maybe like Quintessenz, can do a campaign against the organizations and the committees and the secret services and the governments who define and push these standardizations through committees. So, what are our methods of examination of our crime scenes? We can do some sort of data mining. We can put documents in timelines and see if there are some times where some ideas of interception or investigation were interchanged between organizations, or which company or which organization brought this idea in and want to have it standardized.
May I jump in here just so nobody gets confused? What Chris refers to now in the context of biometrics is valid for all standardization processes. So we did this before in the surveillance standardization groups, so it's quite the same. Documents, internal papers, products, and that's why he sometimes said surveillance. It's the same process whether you go to the ETSI or you go to the biometrics working group.
One very important point is that there are a lot of several specialized talking about this draft, these standards, these protocols, because if you want to find out why they want to intercept at a special point, you need some specialized for telecom technology networks who can tell you where on a special point all data is coming to one point and one data stream where you can intercept this at its best. You can use, this was very important at the ETSI documents. You can use information network, interchange with other organizations doing this work, doing investigative journalism, want to find out protocols, documents who are showing the way of standardization of biometric standardization or interception. You find a lot of resources in the web and the news. Read the news and you have a lot of information what's going on. You can do a simple web research. It's mostly all resources we use are public resources. So what we do is to use all these resources and data mine a process and analyze it and find out what are the results for our civil rights and for our laws and for our civil society. Okay. Microsoft, where PowerPoint can read everything, I see. So, okay, then okay, then only about voice, we had a lot of past projects. In 1996, there were OECD crypto guideline who wanted to promote cryptography, but wanted to have programs only for legal use, and wanted to produce software that someone who wants to do a crime instead can't use that. And the Austrian delegation did some amendment on that. The Quintessenz published this document, which was in the public, but nobody read it, and we could get some amendment in the process of this crypto guideline. 1999, very important, there were the Infopol documents. The first investigation of Infopol was 1998, but 1999...
Infopol is police surveillance efforts. That was before the technical standardization, before it was discussed on a political level, and the acronym of this paper was called Infopol, because this is the way they called the police cooperation working group of the EU calls their papers. It's the acronym, and we took the Infopol acronym and branded the whole thing Infopol, and this was pretty useful because people would understand afterwards what was meant.
And Infopol was the follow-up of Echelon, who wanted to intercept analog data, and now they wanted to get also the digital data, and this was the project Infopol. It was also some sort of legal help between police agencies, the FBI and the European Union. 2000, the ETSI documents were published, where all these things decided at Infopol were put into standards how someone gets to where the interception should work. Then there was 9/11, and there was a big rush in civil rights, and then were passenger name records you hear today, where we got a real nice Word document and could find out how the European Union and the USA interchange data. And
we can show this document. This is nice. So what we wanted to say is we have been doing this for a while, and everything we did has shown as part of one and the same process. That's the point. It's one and the same process. It's not 5 processes, and biometrics and telephone surveillance are very closely interlinked to each other. And this is the first document on the passenger name records that was published. Was published this spring, and it really showed nicely. What is this? You see, red is the US ink, blue the European. And the funny thing is, if you flip through it, the most incredible passages of this document, there was nothing the Europeans said against it, because this is the final draft version. It was the final draft version, and we found this kind of text hidden in the final version. You know, Word documents sometimes show you things you would never have dreamed of. And there are also we also found names, and this put us, it was a mere accident. We already talked before we should do a thing, and we always had Our friend Nicky Hager and mine, you know, who wrote this, New Zealander, who wrote this famous 1996 book on Echelon. In fact, Nicky Hager uncovered the whole thing. And when he visited us in Austria, he's the son of an Austrian expatriate. His father was kicked out from Austria in 1938. And he told us, this guy told us, we must apply their methods against them. And this Quintessenz effort is one of the efforts. And now I get back to the, I think, to the more we come now to the technical part. Or what kind of documents do we have?
Okay, I'll give you a brief introduction what we are doing now and why we are doing it. Some are already been told by Eric or Chris. Where's my... Where's my... So, what we're doing now is because, the standardization, as told already by Eric, is in full progress, and such standardization is always a nice playground for different lobby groups, for the interests of the intelligence community, of politicians, of companies. And these standards will later be a welcome excuse why we're doing it. It's standardized, it's told there we should do it, and we like to uncover this a little bit, show the hidden connections that are not obvious on the first sight. This is because the standardization has been set up nearly from scratch in an really small amount of time. Governments are pumping waste amounts of money into this technology and into the standardization, and everything happens since 2002, more or less. And the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is even more accelerating the development of the standards because they need to set up their US visit program in 2004. Yeah, Chris already told a little bit what we are doing. We try, we look first by hand, sort them, find keywords, probably make short abstracts or make pools for different topic complexes. And then we try to research names, numbers, backgrounds, what the biographies of the people are involved in there. And some documents or this document contains plans and details that aren't published in the press or like told us on press conferences or in the media. It's first written there, somehow hidden, and then later we will present it when it's ready to the public, and then it's fixed, and we don't have to, we can't say anything to it later. We also will use automated text analysis to find things we probably didn't thought of. For example, Waker or Gate, both are Java tools, or it's not products, it's more development kits of frameworks. You have to put together, make your program with it, And it's not like you hump all together and then mix it a little bit and then the system will give you some output you can use. You have to influence it and you have to form some sort of questions and construct it for your purpose. Yeah, we have really a lot of documents and it's growing and growing. Here's a short list of what we usually get. Very nice, and we already showed some of the conference papers and the presentations. They are written for the educated audience, and they don't have to say everything frankly or hidden. I mean, they don't say everything, but they bring things you don't find elsewhere. And sometimes I get the impression that even the most invasive and most cruel ideas, if they are written down, you can sell it to the public, to the politicians, to agencies, or I think, yeah, it's somehow you find really things that are, yeah.
Things you would never have expected.
Yeah. Okay,
They tend to forget things in the papers. They tend to make mistakes, copy things into the papers, like names they shouldn't have copied, because mistake happens. We are we're tracking down mistakes, because we know if we find a mistake, there is most likely a very interesting information in it. As you see, sometimes you see who is the author of this document, and if you have the author, and this person should really not be the author of this document because he works for something else. Quite frequently during our research works, we lost people. People vanished. And this is the good thing, if you push around, blow around their names, some of them will get lost. Because some of those people do not like to have their names pushed around in fora and published here and published there, because they have some kind of job where their name is very important. And so this is another side effect. For example, during my research for the ETSI surveillance program, we lost two at the Deutsche RecTP at Mainz. Those people disappeared. They never disappeared again in the working groups, and before they were secretaries there. They played a leading role. We published their name and they vanished. And when I called the RecTP in Mainz asking for this guy, I found in the papers they didn't know him there. You know, things like this happen. Afterwards they knew him, but he was not in the telephone directory of RecTP. They found him later sitting in a room, and he was there, but he was not in the phone register of RecTP. And things like this quite frequently happens. I think we are already...
Yeah, I will try to speed up.
We speed things up.
Yeah, this is okay. This is a short list of the main players. These are the people and that are putting together the interchange formats, the database formats. For example, the CBEFF, the Common Biometric Exchange File Format. Should look up it on the internet. It's kind of made a format for exchanging information. Yeah, okay, I will not go further in detail with the players. Yeah, what we're looking for, Erich already told it a little bit. You find, if we look at these documents, we find a lot of strange coincidence. And we get insight into the process we probably should not. I mean, okay, it was not intended, because it's the papers were written for the educated audience, for a closed group. They knew each other, and then somehow they left these papers unattended on the web, for example. Things you already told, like Jeffrey Dunn, president of the Biometrics Consortium and vice president of the NSA, or the secretary of the, I think it was the biometrics group.
Many of those people play more than one role, and they are in more than one group, and some of them change their identities in the groups. They don't change their names, but they change their professions. Sometimes the same person is related to the British Home Office. During the next conference, he's called a liaison officer to the international law enforcement telecom seminars. The next time he's a liaison officer for EU working groups, and then again the same person is listed as the British Department of Trade. Who is this guy? Well, this guy is clearly a spook. And he is one of those traveling spooks that interconnect those working groups. You can find out things like this if you analyze the papers. If he's always listed with another office he derives from. So that's I think Philip has still a very short part on the technical aspects of our database, because Philip has written most of the programs we started to use.
Yes, I would like to give a short introduction into the technical matters behind our work, what we're doing. The main system we're using to publish the documents is our Q machine, which is running the website Quintessenz.at and several other websites. The first question is, how do we get the documents? There are several possibilities. If we already have the documents, we can simply upload them. If you have the documents, there is the possibility that you can anonymously upload them. So if you have a document, you can anonymously upload it. We will remove any links to you if that's necessary. So if you are in charge of interesting documents, you can uncover them.
Keep in mind, you are the people working in companies, and you're not just making some program. You're changing the society. You're making the world where we live together in the future. And keep this in mind, that things you make now change the world. And it's not a toy you're probably making for a big company. Not encourage people to do some nasty things, but just
what I wanted to say is, watch the upload link.
Yeah.
Yes, then if you get links to websites, we're using WeGet and some custom-made Perl-based solutions to download them. We even have solutions to create a complete archive of mailing lists back to 1994. I think we got some very interesting stuff. Yes, so
This consortium mailing list back to 1994, very interesting, with many .mil addresses.
in the beginning, then they changed to .com addresses, I think, but well, that's a different issue. Okay, so we've got a lot of documents, we've got a lot of emails. What's the next that we can do with it? We're looking on it. Where does it come from? Where did we got it? When was it created? And what was the history of the document? So, for example, as we saw before, different states of draft versions and things like that are sometimes very interesting, and to see the difference between the versions. So version control gets a really interesting application for us. The next thing is that we're doing keyword analysis on it, having a look when do keywords appear thus when are keywords becoming common, and who is transferring the language? So who is having it? Who developed the words that people use afterwards? To get an idea of what happened and how the ideas spread. And we're using several text mining, and we're planning to use several text mining applications for it. Then so we have a lot of documents in it. We've started to get to know where we got it from and some information in it. The next thing we do is when we have two documents that fit together, we create a link and we link the related documents together. And when we see that there's a structure behind it, so some kind of new topic, then we create a new topic for it and link all the documents that are related to that topic to it, so that you can start getting into the topics and getting information about it. I think we do not have the internet here at the moment, so I advise you to have a look at Quintessenz.at afterwards and see what we're doing there. The next thing we have to do is doing the authoring, writing abstracts of documents, writing abstracts of the topics we define, and do titling work. Titling is something very special.
Titling is tricky.
Titling is tricky, yes.
Titling is tricky because all those documents have very long titles. You need to shrink those titles, but you can't eliminate everything out of the title. So we started this kind of pretty strange condensing of titles, but it works. And the point is, if we write an abstract of the document, it's for the next researcher. So researcher A writes a note to researcher B, contains that and that, contains nice photographs, contains comparisons, so the next researcher would know what's inside. And that's the way we will treat first, as we started already, we will treat first the key documents in this way, documents within the key documents before. In the end, you never know what is a key document because you might find gold somewhere. Not gold exactly, but some hidden name, some phone number, some office number, earlier versions, everything. And the point is, key documents, titling, abstracts, order, and then, before you have to read everything through, no way, there is no other way, you can't there is no automatization of an unknown process you don't know, and then you put it into a machine and the data miner says that's facts about this. No, the things don't work like this. If we would apply simple data mining methods, keywords and things, we used many of those tools. They did not work out because I know that the SECLI, the Ethics Committee Lawful Interception, is connected to the ETSI, and I need not to see this on a graph. And that is mainly what those our topic maps, how are they called, do. So we had not much use for those things in the beginning, but with the questions count. If you find the right question, you will find the answers. If you don't find the right questions, you won't get any answer at all, and you see just what the documents mostly contain, large and huge columns of numbers.
Yes, so we're working out the material, and we're writing information about the topic, so that someone who is new to the thing can introduce himself alone on our website to get into the topics and know what's about it, and then can go into reading the documents, can see what's in it, and can work himself into the topic as deep as he wants. So what we're doing at the end is working out how we're presenting the big database we built. We're putting out campaigns about it. We're putting out QDPassion about it. QDPassion are the media of Quintessenz, which is a newsletter with several or a few QDPassion per day around all the topics. So informational newsletter. And then we define the visualization rules, how the topics and how the documents and everything should be presented on the website and or on other media. So what is the result? The result is www.quintessenz.at. There we will soon have about 1.5 gigabytes of documents about biometrics and all other topics around, presented nicely. I think we are putting together a CD-ROM which will be somehow available, I don't know yet exactly how, here on the CCC. There emerged several articles in the media about it, and yes, here is the link where you can inform yourself about it in detail. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Nice, guys. It seems that we have given all possible answers. Okay, if there are no questions around, we are still available outside for your perusal.